Let's begin on Capitol Hill, where the House committee probing the January 6th Capitol riot has issued 10 new subpoenas for former Trump advisors, the most notable being former White House press secretary Kayleigh McEnany and senior advisor to the former president, Stephen Miller. The committee accuses both of spreading false information about the 2020 election. Earlier this week, the committee demanded records and testimony from former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and Trump attorney John Eastman. The former president is urging his allies, such as political strategist Steve Bannon, to defy those subpoenas. Joining us now from the Hill with more is Kris Van Cleave. So, Kris, has the Justice Department given any indication on whether they will prosecute in order to enforce the panel's subpoenas? How important is it that they do so?
So the Justice Department has indicated that they are reviewing the criminal referral from the House of Representatives to hold Steve Bannon in contempt of court. That happened about 3 weeks ago, but no final decision has been made there. If you're a member of the House committee, you would say it's important the Justice Department take action against Steve Bannon and pursue charges in order to uphold the sanctity, if you will, of a subpoena from Congress. You can't defy congressional subpoenas. Certainly the committee would like to see the DOJ send a message that if you do defy a subpoena, you will face criminal charges. So, that's sort of the argument here. Congress has this oversight authority. They have the ability to issue subpoenas. The question is, will they be backed up with the teeth that can go along with a subpoena if you try to defy it?
Meantime, as we've reported, a federal judge has denied the former President Donald Trump's request to withhold White House records from the panel. Committee member and Wyoming Republican Liz Cheney addressed this while speaking at a fundraiser in New Hampshire this week. Here's what she said.
And at this moment, when it matters most, we are also confronting a domestic threat that we've never faced before. A former president who's attempting to unravel the foundations of our constitutional republic.
So Donald Trump's lawyers have already filed an appeal on this, but in the judge's ruling, she also addressed the question of Trump's ability to assert executive privilege. What exactly did the judge say regarding this?
Yeah, so the judge wrote, presidents are not kings and plaintiff, meaning Mr. Trump, is not president. The decision continued, this is a dispute between a former and incumbent president, and the Supreme Court has already made clear the incumbent's view is accorded greater weight. Basically, the sitting president has more of a say on what is executive privilege and what it covers than a former president.
So the National Archives, Kris, is set to turn over former President Trump's White House records by Friday. But as Anne-Marie noted, the president and his lawyers filed notice to appeal the judge's ruling. Could this stop this document transfer from taking place on Friday?
Absolutely. An appeals court could issue a temporary injunction. They could issue a quick ruling. But it certainly is within the power of an appellate court to pause the document release process. An appellate court could very quickly greenlight it as well, and then you might see yet another appeal, this one all the way to the Supreme Court. If you're the Trump team, your goal is to stop or delay this document release process as long as possible. But we're talking about hundreds of pages of documents from the Trump-era White House that could be released Friday afternoon unless there is an order to stop it.
So I want to ask you about something else. A watchdog probe just released a report yesterday and found that more than a dozen high-level Trump administration officials violated the Hatch Act, saying that they improperly used their official government powers to try and influence the 2020 election, essentially campaigning. What can you tell us about this report, and what does it mean? Will there be any consequences?
So the Hatch Act is a 90-year-old or so law, 1939, that basically says folks in government office can't campaign, can't do certain political campaigning as part of their official functions. And what the Office of Special Counsel found was that you had 13 former Trump officials who appeared to violate the Hatch Act. 11 of those were in examples of live TV interviews. So somebody perhaps speaking as their position as an advisor to the president, but actually talking about the campaign. And then 2 other instances that dealt with the Republican National Convention. And these are sort of a who's who of the Trump administration. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Kellyanne Conway, Jared Kushner, Stephen Miller. So a long list of Trump officials that may have violated the Hatch Act. I think at the end of the day, as far as Main Street is concerned, this is a violation of when you can campaign and how you can campaign in an election that's already happened, and the people have spoken, and Mr. Trump wasn't reelected.
So in other news, Kris, we're also learning about the disturbing threats made against Republican lawmakers who supported President Biden's infrastructure bill. Congressman Fred Upton of Michigan is one of them. He claims this started after a House colleague tweeted the names and office phone numbers of several colleagues. Who is he referencing, and do we know if any others have received similar threats?
Well, lawmakers are receiving threats at a record rate. We know more than 9,000 threats against lawmakers have come in this year, and that's thousands above past years. That's part of the, this new normal almost for elected officials on all sides of both sides of the aisle here are seeing a significant increase in threats, and that's certainly had ramped up during the election and since January 6th. Mr. Upton received a voicemail that he played that was profanity laced, that basically wished death on him and his family. He says that call and hundreds of others came after Marjorie Taylor Greene, the representative from Georgia, a Republican, tweeted out a list of the 13 Republicans who voted for the infrastructure bill in the House with their office phone numbers. Congresswoman Greene says that she herself receives death threats, and that she's certainly not encouraging or condoning that behavior, but she does believe it is appropriate for taxpayers to, quote, politely let elected officials know how they feel about their votes. I think when we're talking about this infrastructure bill, it's important to note that in the Senate, it passed with wide bipartisan support. You saw Mitch McConnell voting for it. The deal was crafted by 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats. This was not really a one-party bill. And in fact saw far more Republican support in the Senate than it got in the House. But you are seeing lawmakers on a daily basis receiving threats, and certainly when there's been a contentious vote, you see more of that. Just this week, we've been talking about Representative Paul Gosar of Arizona, who apparently manipulated like an anime cartoon that depicted violence against AOC and perhaps President Biden. So there is a heated rhetoric here that continues and is translating to real-world threats against lawmakers.
Time to bring the temperature down. Kris Van Cleave, thank you.
Sure thing.